Hi, all. Welcome to the Holistic Ascent podcast, where we talk about specific wellness tools, resources, and practices to become more empowered in our wellness journeys. I'm Lexi Heron, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Casey Kang. Casey is a 3-time survivor of acute lymphoblastic leukemia and a stroke survivor. Casey is a trauma-informed cancer coach using somatic movement and breathwork with survivors so they can heal and are able to reclaim their lives and learn how to live healthier to ensure they're stronger both physically, mentally, and emotionally so they don't have to live life in fear. Welcome to the show, Casey. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me, Lexi. It's genuinely a pleasure to be here today.
Oh, wow. Yes, I am just so inspired by you and the work you're doing. I was scrolling through your Instagram and I was just reading your inspirational posts and everything, and just the mindset that you have amidst your insane story is just so powerful and so encouraging.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. Obviously, nothing I planned for, but I am taking it one step at a time, and a lot of it came naturally to me, but some of it clearly did not.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what I didn't know, and that started 10 years ago, which is kind of crazy.
Wow. So is 10 years ago when your journey with cancer began?
Yep, it was February 14th, 2014.
Would you mind digging into that story for us? Like, how did you first find out that you were diagnosed with cancer?
Yeah, so it was February 14th, 2014, and I was not feeling well and had a couple of doctor's visits before that. So that day I went to work and I had an appointment, follow up with an ENT, and I just ear, nose, and throat doctor. And I just was like, I'll be back after lunch. I'll see you guys in an hour. So I leave to go do this appointment, and I originally had gone in for some nodes on my neck. The doctor gave me antibiotics, so this was the follow-up 2 weeks later. And the time that I stopped taking the antibiotics, which was Monday, to the time that I arrived at his office on a Friday, all of my symptoms exacerbated and exploded, basically, like beyond what I
Wow.
was already experiencing.
Okay.
And so I'm in the office and he's touching, feeling, doing all the things that an ear, nose, and throat person does. And he goes, I think you need to see an internist. He goes, they're in the next building. He goes, I'll call over there and see if we can get you in. And I'm annoyed because I'm like, I have to go back to work, right? So stupid. In hindsight, so stupid.
Right.
And so I walk over there. I think my now ex-husband knew something was happening beyond what I thought,
Mm.
because he instinctually was like, I'll go with you, which
Oh,
never has
interesting.
gone to a doctor's appointment in my life with me. So he was with me and we walk over there, and it's in a different building. And by the time we get over there, we walk into the waiting room and it's completely full. And we check in and they go, oh, right here into an examination room. And I was like, oh, that's weird. The
Yeah.
entire room's full and you're walking me into an examination room. And I was like, that was my first indication that something wasn't right. And I was like, okay, it can't be that bad. They just maybe want to nip this in the bud.
Right.
So he's doing all these things. He's like trying to get a pulse ox reading, can't do it, can't get it. He's like, are you okay? He kept asking me if I was okay. I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm like, not thinking anything about it. And he was like, well, after he finishes all of the things that he's doing, he goes, I need to take blood. He goes, here's the thing, I can order it for you, and we won't get the results till Monday. He goes, I'm going on a ski vacation this weekend, so I won't see it till then. He goes, or you can go through the ER and we'll go get results immediately. And I was like, that's a weird comment to make, right?
Yeah.
So I look at him and I go, what would you do? He goes, I would go through the ER, not panic, not anything, just very calmly. If it were me, I would go through the ER.
Oh, shoot.
So I was like, that's weird. Okay. And I was like, maybe he just really wants to know. Still not connecting any dots. So we get into so finally I get over to the ER, which is another different building, and they hook me up to an IV, all these things. And they're like, they drew blood. And in the meantime, I'm in an X-ray room because I was experiencing such severe low back pain. They were like, let's check that out. And by the time I got back from the X-ray, they were immediately hooking me up to blood. And I was like, that's weird. Why am I getting blood? And like all these things. And the doctor comes in and he goes, this is what we think you have. Hands two pieces of paper over to my now ex-husband. And I just kept pestering him, like, what does it say? What does it say? Because I can't remember if the doctor actually said cancer out loud or not.
Yeah.
And my ex-husband was like, it says cancer, and like really confused. And I was like, well, what does it say? What does it say? He goes, they think you have cancer. And I was like, what? Like almost in disbelief.
Yeah.
I didn't believe that. And I was like,
Right.
it can't be right. And so the doctor comes back and he goes, do you have any questions? We have to transfer you downtown because I was in the suburbs for work. He goes, we have to transfer you downtown to the hospital, which I live downtown, so I was okay with that. And I was like, I'll be back at work on Monday, still thinking that.
Wow.
And I just stopped, and immediately I tell inappropriate jokes when I'm uncomfortable. And I told a very inappropriate joke, and the doctor turned around and walked away and was like, no, we're shutting that down. And so I get transferred downtown, and over the weekend, I'm in testing like the entire weekend. And I was like, I need to go to work. Like, I think I need to tell them that I may not be there on Monday. Like, what's happening? Like, because we still nothing was confirmed. They finally, on Monday, confirmed. They were like, we need to start you on chemotherapy immediately. Like, blah, blah, blah. They didn't even have the test results, all the test results back. They were just like, we know this is what it is. And now we just need clarity on what type it is, if there's a subtype and all these things. So that's basically how I found out. And I was hospitalized for 28 days to begin with because the induction phase of the chemotherapy for what I have is so aggressive that they can't have you as an outpatient because there's too many things that go wrong. So I basically begged them after 28 days, like, please let me go home. I will do anything. I will come back every day if you need me to. And I was basically going back 4 or 5 times a week, still getting treatment. Then 4 months into treatment, I had a stroke.
Oh my goodness.
Because of the chemotherapy.
Wow.
And that was not something, again, that I expected. And there were some really dark moments where I just was like, what are we doing? What am I doing? You know, like the darkest moment was I started just sobbing. I'm in the rehab hospital at this time, and my ex-husband putting on my shoe, and I'm looking down and I go, and I'm like, teach me how to tie my shoe. And he's like, what? And I was like, I don't, like, my brain cognition was completely dismantled. And I was like, I want you to teach me how to tie my shoe. Cause I in my brain couldn't figure out the loops and the things. And he goes, okay. And he's like trying to remember how did I learn how to tie my shoe?
Right.
And he's like, you take the loops and then you loop this one and then you tie, and I'm like, and I start sobbing and he's like, what's wrong? And I go, this is so sad. I go, I'm 31 years old learning how to tie my shoe.
Mm-hmm.
Tying my shoe, like crying and going like, I should be living life and like doing all these things. And I'm learning how to tie a shoe when I should be teaching a child how to tie a shoe. Like it was so in my brain, like, this is not right. This isn't how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was still going through chemotherapy while going through rehab because I didn't reach remission yet.
Oh
So
my
they were like,
goodness.
they're like, we can't stop.
Wow, you literally had 0 time to process anything from like the first get-go when you saw the ENT. And then you just, I can't even imagine. That is insane.
It is insane. And so then I'm out of the rehab hospital after like 3 weeks, and I'm going to rehab 5 days a week, 3 hours every single day.
Wow.
And it's grueling. It's pain beyond measure, because you don't even know what it feels like to feel not be in some sort of pain at this point. So you just are like, everything hurts. What does it matter, right? And still going through chemotherapy. So I'd sometimes get done with rehab and go walk right out, because the hospital was like across the street and like down the block a little bit. Sometimes I could walk, sometimes I had to get picked up and we drive over, and still getting chemotherapy, right? Like no, we couldn't stop.
Is that a common occurrence for someone to have a stroke as a side effect to chemotherapy?
It is rare.
Okay.
I fall into the 1% on that one. Apparently the one specific drug that they think it was from is called pegosparaginase, and
Okay.
it's truly only it's rarely given outside of the acute lymphoblastic leukemia group.
Mm.
It's given to other leukemias as well, but it's it's such an aggressive drug that they actually don't recommend giving it to anyone over the age of 30.
Oh my goodness.
It's known to cause strokes. Something I learned after the fact, of
Ugh.
course. But,
Yeah.
but because my age was so cuspy, I
Yeah.
think they assumed I would be okay.
Right.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, so that was the tough thing to learn after the fact, because I'm like, you mean this could have been prevented?
Right. I was thinking about that with a few things you said, and I was like, wow, you didn't even really have that chance to even like do your research or be like, yes, I want to opt for this treatment or opt out of this one. You just got thrown into it all.
Yeah. And
Wow.
and so quickly, because my body, I read later, was 88% of my body was cancer.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't know that at the time, obviously, like, and to know that and to realize, like, I got up and went to work. Like, I was
Yeah.
working that morning. Like, basically dying and working at the same time. And I asked later, I go, "What would have happened if I didn't come to the hospital and I that day?" They're like,
Right.
"At some point you would have passed out somewhere." And I'm like, "So I could have been driving home passed out." Like, that's wild to me.
Wow. Wow. And you're sitting here sharing this with us today. I mean, that is incredible. That is such a blessing.
Yeah, so I get done with this 18-month protocol. That's how long it was. 7 weeks in remission, or I'm sorry, not in remission, but done with treatment,
Right.
and I relapse.
Oh my goodness.
This time I knew something wasn't right. I was like, my gut was like, I don't think this is good. Like, I don't want to say you have cancer. My gut was like, but something's not right. And I was like, it feels like it's again. So I actually called them proactively. I was still getting blood work once a week, but it was a Monday and I wasn't getting blood work till Wednesday. I was like, can I go get blood work today? And they're
Mhm.
like, why? I was like, I'm not feeling 100%. I go, I think something's wrong. So I went and did this blood work, and I got a call an hour later, and they were like, you need to come back to the hospital. And I was back at work, and I went into my boss's office and I just fell to the floor
Mm.
and I started crying. I honestly still to this day don't know how I got to the hospital. Like, I genuinely, like, I would have to, like, go ask someone.
Yeah.
I just, like, blacked out after that. Like,
Yeah.
you don't think. I don't even
Right.
remember. I remember her going just like, "Okay, let's, like, not panic, but
Mhm.
put can you, like, put yourself together enough to get out of the office," basically, like, so people wouldn't see me all upset. And I was like, "Yeah, I just need a minute." And the next thing I remember is being in the hospital, admitted to the hospital with my ex-husband, and we're sitting there and we're having a conversation in the hospital room with my oncologist who was not on rounds, and that is not normal,
Okay.
right?
Oh,
'Cause it's usually, like, the rounding doctor,
yeah.
and so she's going, we're in a very serious situation. She goes, your body is no longer responding to chemotherapy.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, okay, sounds like there should be some good news.
Yeah.
And she was like, there's an immunotherapy, or we can go to a clinical trial. Which one do you want to do? I'm sitting there going like, I'm not a flippin' doctor. What?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're like, I
Like,
have no idea.
I'm like sitting there going, where's the Google? Because like, I don't know. And we're sitting there staring at her. And I'm going, and we're talking it out. We're talking it through, all the clinical trial details, as much as she could give us. And the immunotherapy. And we're like, how long do we have to decide? She's like, fairly quickly. And she's like staring at us. And I'm like, you want us to make a decision now? Okay.
Oh my goodness.
I don't even have a chance to research. Neither does my, husband. And like, you just want us to decide. So I go, okay, if I do the immunotherapy, does it negate me from the clinical trial? Because that was like important to have something. And she's like, no. And I go, okay, based on what you're telling me, it sounds like this is the least aggressive treatment. I go, let's try that. And if that doesn't work, clinical trial.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good plan. So they're like, okay, this immunotherapy, I get hooked up to it. I get, after a day or so, I get released from the hospital. And they're like, it's basically a fanny pack with 24-hour infusion for, I think, 3 days. You come back to the hospital after a day off, and then you get hooked back up to another one.
Okay.
So I go home and I'm showering and I'm like, I'm exhausted to a level like I've never felt before. And I was like, I can't even stand in the shower for more than a minute. I'm like sitting in the shower, like kind of showering. And I look at my husband and I'm like, something's not right. I go, I can't catch my breath and I can't stand. And I feel like I'm just going to pass out. And he goes, okay. He goes, well, what do you want to do? I go, I think I need to go back to the hospital. And he goes, okay. So we went to the ER and they again admitted me and they were like, okay. But as they admitted me, they're like, it kept getting worse. And I was like, nothing's working. What you're doing to try and stop whatever's going on. Basically, what was happening was my body was sent into a cytokine release storm, which is where your body starts to shut down from the inside out. So it was like attacking itself, trying to kill itself because it was like, something's in here. We're attacking everything because we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm in the hospital and I'm in like on the normal floor and they're like, I'm spiking 105-degree fevers. Like they're like, I'm on cooling pads. They're ice packs everywhere. And they're like, we're going to transfer you to the ICU because we are not equipped to handle you on this floor. And I said, no, please don't. I don't want to go back to the ICU. It's terrible. It's awful. And I was like, I promise you I'll be fine. I'm trying to convince the charge nurse of this. She's like looking at me and she was like, I don't know. So then the ICU doctor comes in and I'm talking to her and I'm like, I promise you I'll be fine. I promise it's done. We're okay. And then for whatever reason, my body just accepted that information and stopped.
Wow.
And
So
I
you
don't
saw
know.
the power of your thoughts and your mind just in that moment.
Yeah, and I think partly it was like the immunotherapy was leaving my body finally.
Yeah.
However, it needed to dissipate, but also like I just decided I was done and I was done.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And they're like, okay, but if your fever comes back even like 1 degree off, they're like, we're remitting you. I was like, okay, fair.
Okay.
Fair. So then I'm like, okay, I guess we're going to a clinical trial. Good. Okay, let's do it. So for a clinical trial, there's a lot of testing. Like they test you for everything because they need a baseline of
Right.
everything. And so it's taking like a month to go through all these testings, the coordination, what they need to do for the paperwork, all of these things. I'm still in the hospital. A week before I'm supposed to start this clinical trial, it got shut down.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, okay, what's next? The doctor comes in, the rounding doctor, and goes, well, we don't have any options here. And I was like, okay, but where else has options? They're like, there's only one other clinical trial going on at this time. It's at a different hospital, and there's a wait list. They're like, we're going to put you on the wait list. But in the meantime, that does not mean that you're going to qualify for that clinical trial. And there's no line skipping in this wait list. And we don't know when a spot's going to open up. I go, okay, so realistically, like, how long can you keep me alive? Basically, is what I was asking without asking. And they're
Right.
like, maybe 6 months.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So to keep the cancer at bay, they decided to do a flag protocol, which was chemotherapy. And they're like, we don't know if it's going to work. Maybe it'll be some miracle. And I was like, it's not going to work. But I went through it.
Yeah.
It was awful. It's like one of the most aggressive treatments that you could have. It's like 4 different of the most aggressive chemotherapies that you can have at once. And the side effects are brutal. And I get done with that and I'm like, okay, we're keeping the cancer at bay. I'm getting blood. I'm getting platelets to keep me alive. I'm like, can I go home? Because if we're just waiting, like, I don't want to wait in the hospital.
Yeah.
And I'm going stir crazy. Mind you, we're at day like 67 straight of the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm mentally like, I need a break from here. I need to sleep. I need my bed. I need things. And they were like, okay, but you promised to come back for like blood, platelets, anything we ask. I go, I promise you. I go, I will come back. They're like, okay. They're like, in the meantime, this came out, which was a different immunotherapy, not for my cancer. And they're like, do you want to try it? The Leukemia and Lymphoma Society conference for doctors had just ended. This piece of research came from it. And I said, based on what I experienced before, this doesn't sound promising, nor something that I want to dive into. They're like, can we think about it? It's 2 pages of research, 114 participants, 11 people had the disease that I had. The outcomes were not good. I think it was like 11% success rate. It's not good overall.
No.
It's not good. Like, these aren't numbers you want to hear.
No.
And so my husband goes, there's not even anything to research. You can't Google this. It's not out yet. There's nothing. So I look over at him at some point and I'm like, I'm going to do it. I go, because if it doesn't help me, maybe it's going to help someone else.
Wow.
So we go back to the doctor and he's like, okay, you're in. And we're like, we're in. And because otherwise we're just waiting, and that's fine to wait, but like, I don't have that much time.
Yeah.
He goes, we're going to let you out of the hospital. In the meantime, we're going to write a letter of compassion to the FDA. We're going to write a letter of compassion to the drug manufacturer. Both have to approve for you to use this drug. And that's going to take some time. He goes, so we're going to let you out. But if it were me, I would settle my affairs.
Wow.
Again, not words you want to hear.
No.
Going through cancer. And so we left, and I was like, it was like a jailbreak, to be honest. Yeah. And I could breathe air again, and fresh air, and sleep in my bed. And I was like, okay. Started to come back to like a little bit of normalcy, if you have any in that situation. And I did. I had really hard conversations with the people that I loved. I planned my funeral.
Wow.
Yeah, I had the hardest conversation I ever thought I would never have with my dad. We're sitting there staring at Law and Order. I can't even look at him. I'm choking back tears. I just go, Dad, I might not make it. And without skipping a beat, without looking over, he goes, sometimes we don't make it to the end. And I was like, what? Because what I wanted him to say was like, it's going to be okay. You're going to make it. Like,
yeah.
All those things that a daughter wants to hear.
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity like 2-3 years ago to ask him, like, why did you say that? And he goes, looks at me and he goes, there are no books on how to talk to your dying daughter.
So true.
And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, he didn't know how to respond either. And
yeah. And then in that moment of talking about it, I realized he was trying to wrestle and grab with the same thing that I was,
Yes.
which is like that I might die.
Wow.
And spoiler alert, because I'm here. Sorry for those of
Mm.
you who were wondering if I got approved. I did. I was
Wow.
approved for this drug. And they started off with, we're going to do 4 rounds and see what happens because we don't know. So I did 4 rounds and they were like, you're in remission. And I was like, okay, so we're doing stem cell transplant, obviously,
Wow.
which was the goal at that point to get me into remission to do that. My brother's my donor. He's 100% match.
Wow.
And so I do the stem cell transplant back in the hospital again for another 30 something days. And I get out and again, like a jailbreak free. I'm like, oh, thank God I can breathe air. Still, my body's freaking out because of graft versus host. And I'm still recovering 6 months later and it comes back.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, oh, that's the moment where I literally wanted to throw in the towel. I looked at my husband at the time and I go, I'm done. I can't do
Yeah.
this anymore. I go, I can't. I go, I'm done. And I started crying. And the moment I accepted, like, I'm done, my voice popped into my head and said, your dad would be so disappointed.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember going, oh my God, of course that guy.
Mm.
And that's the moment I was like, to fight so hard to get to this point and then just give up. You would be disappointed.
Yeah.
And then I that's when I made my deal with the universe. I said, fine. I go, one more time, but we're done. Like, we're
Yeah.
literally done. Like, you're either going to kill me or
Yeah.
you're going to let me live, but I'm not doing this for the rest of my life.
Right.
And this isn't for me. This is for everyone that got me this far, so far. And we're in like year 3.
Wow. Wow.
I go, because quite frankly, I don't care if I live or die. This is for them. I go, because we're done.
Right.
So I looked back up at my husband and I was like, one more time, but that's it. We're done. He goes, are you sure? And I go, yeah. He goes, because whatever you decide is what we're going to do. I go, yep, one more. That's it.
Wow. So you made your decision right then and there
Yeah.
that you were going to fight.
But that was it. Like, I wasn't going to continue to fight on and off for the rest of my life. Like,
Right.
we're done. I've been through enough. Like, I'm good. I've made peace. Yeah. And so the plan originally was to do another 4 rounds to get me into remission and do another stem cell transplant.
Okay.
My brother still had cells left over. So they were like, okay, we're going to try it again. Because I through that 6 months, I never reached 100% engraftment, which is basically like any other organ transplant where your body accepts it.
Right.
It was still fighting it.
Mm.
And so 4 more rounds, I was in remission. I was like, okay, great. Let's do this stem cell transplant again. And mentally, I'm like trying to prepare already. And they're like, my oncologist goes, we're just going to wait. And I was like, what? I don't like this plan. They're like, but we want to see how your body responds to just what's going on now. Because your body's still fighting engraftment. And this immunotherapy got you in remission. Can we just give it some time? And I was like, well, how much time? And they're like, we don't know yet. We haven't decided. Just wait. It's like, I live like that. Going back to the hospital every week, blood, platelets, see the oncologist with no plan. We're still waiting. And every time I go to the doctor and see the oncologist, every time I leave in that 6 months, she grabs my shoulder before she exits the room and goes, baby girl, we're just lucky you're alive. I'm just like, not helpful.
Yeah. You're like, probably not what I wanted to hear right now.
No.
Wow.
And so yeah, so finally, like, I worked up the courage and I was like, what, can I go live life? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And they're like, they just look at me and they're like, yeah, sure, go for it. Try it out. I was like, what?
Yes.
And I was like, okay. I go, so how do I go do that? And they're like, I don't know, eat right, exercise. That's literally the advice they gave me.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
in that moment, it dawned on me. I'm like, your job isn't to help me afterward. It's just to kill cancer. Okay.
You're like, okay, this is a
Right?
little bit of a broken system here.
Massively.
Wow. That is
And
extremely eye-opening.
and that's the system of our medical system.
Yeah.
It's just broken.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna figure this out on my own. And as a result of a very much longer story short, I had a nervous breakdown. I was struggling because every survivor I had met in the 5-year period that I was fighting basically said, just wait till you're done. Everything's fine. Everything gets better. No one talked about the fear, the anxiety, the lifestyle changes. No one had talked about like what you need to do to try and prevent it from happening again. It was like a secret everyone was carrying, but no one
Yeah.
talked about. And my expectations versus reality were so drastically different that I had a nervous breakdown. And I was in
Yeah.
therapy and still had a nervous breakdown.
Well, understandably so. My goodness.
Yeah.
What did you do after this nervous breakdown then?
That night that I had a nervous breakdown, which my husband at the time called his mom and my dad over because he didn't know what else to
Yeah.
do. Because medically speaking, I was fine. I
Right.
just wasn't fine.
Yeah.
um, and that was the first time I admitted that I was not okay as well.
Yeah.
Because everyone kept going, well, aren't you happy you're done? And I was like, oh, no, I'm not.
No.
So I'm crying in a pillow in front of my dad and his mom. And my dad just keeps going, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And I was like, Dad, it is not fine. It is not okay. And it's not going to be okay. And he's like trying to reassure me still.
Yeah.
In that moment, in my mind, I was like, you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to put your big girl pants on and figure it out because you're not going to make it otherwise. You're not going to make it.
Wow.
And that next morning, I woke up with fire I haven't felt in like years of
Wow.
like, you're going to figure it out. And so I
Yeah.
started Googling. I didn't even know what I was Googling, but I was like, you're going to put together something. It's
Yeah.
not going to make sense, but you need at least something to start. And so, you know, mind you, that night that I had nervous breakdown, I called my therapist, didn't answer her phone, didn't call me back for 2 days. 2 days!
Oh my goodness.
This from a woman who knows what I'm going through and goes, call me
Yes.
anytime, I'll pick up.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. You
No.
failed.
Yeah. So that was really dug it into the ground for you that you were like, yeah, I really got to figure this out on my
Right.
own.
I'm really
Because,
on my own.
yeah. And maybe you were feeling like no one else really could fully understand what you were even going through
No,
to
I
be able
mean,
to help you appropriately.
no, and no one I knew could understand. Like, no one
Right.
had gone through what I had gone through. And no, especially the type of cancer that I had gone
Yeah.
through, which is super rare. Um, so I felt like I was on this island and I was the only one who was experiencing this because again, survivors weren't talking about it at that time. This is 10 years, now 6 years ago. And so I put a lot of shame and blame on myself as a result. Like, what's wrong with you? Why are
Yeah.
you broken? Right. Which again didn't help my cause.
Yeah.
And, I just started researching, diving really deep into talking to people and just trying to understand what was happening from a psychological standpoint as well. Like, so I started taking things from random things. So I was like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. It was so imperfect and I wasted a lot of time and money and energy on things that just didn't flat out work or help.
Right.
Um, and I slowly started to make progress. I went on a healing retreat I couldn't afford at the time, but I was like, I need help. I need
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Went on that, started to feel a little bit better, and then kept going, right? Kept diving into all these things that really didn't apply to cancer, but I was like, I don't know. It's like a life change, sort of. Like, I just grasping
Yeah.
at straws.
Yeah.
And I finally, like, pieced it all together, and I was like, "Okay, I'm headed in the right direction. I feel better. I'm in a good spot." And the more I started to share about actually struggling, because I
Mhm.
was just like, I made a conscious choice. I was like, "If you're gonna share, you're gonna share full transparency of what you experienced, your nervous breakdown and everything."
Yeah.
Because and the reason why I decided to share even just the emotions of it was because I was talking to my therapist one day, and we were literally arguing, not yelling, but arguing. Because I go, "You don't understand," and she goes, "Yes, I do," and I go, "No, you don't," and she goes, "Yes, I do. That's what I do for a living." She specialized in cancer, and
Oh,
I stopped her. I go, "Wendy, did you go through cancer?" She goes, "No." I go, "Then you have no," and I dropped the F-bomb,
yeah.
"clue what you are
Right.
talking about." And she goes, "But I do. This is what I do." And I go, "No, you don't." And I walked out. I walked out. I was livid.
Wow.
I was so mad that day. I genuinely didn't know I was going to come back. I literally walked out and I sent her the meanest email, I think, in hindsight, because I was in a bad place, clearly.
Yeah.
Um, and I went back the next day, or not the next day, the next week. I'm sorry. I was only going to her once a week at that point. And she goes, "I didn't think you would come back." And I go, "We're going to agree to disagree that you have no idea what I'm going through
Yeah.
and how I feel." I go, "But I need help.
Right. Yeah.
And you're the only lifeline I have right now."
Wow.
And that's how we proceeded the rest of our therapy.
Wow.
Um, as our time together came to a conclusion, the last therapy session, I go, "So I know you haven't gone through it." I go, "So what's your experience? Besides obviously clinical training."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and she goes, "My brother died of cancer."
Oh,
And I go, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." I go, "But you still have no idea what it's like to go through."
right.
I go, "So
Wow.
please, please don't tell people that you know
Yeah.
what we're experiencing."
Yeah.
And it was something that I needed to say, and I
Yeah.
needed her to hear, because
Right.
she could be compassionate, but she could not understand.
Right. Wow. The way that you learned how to set up those boundaries for yourself, that's incredible. Would you say you were good at that before all of this, or you learned it through the process?
No. Oh my god, that's such a good question. So, no, I definitely had to learn.
Yeah.
I had 0 boundaries prior to cancer.
Mm.
I had to learn how to set them, have them, stick to them. Ooh. I also wasn't good at advocating for myself. I was a
Mm.
huge people pleaser. Mind you, 2 days before I was diagnosed with cancer, I was at a charity event for work
Wow.
because I couldn't say no to anything.
Right.
I had
Wow.
not missed anything they had ever asked me to do. I said, "Yes, what time, where, and how do I need to be there?" I worked over 50 hours a week. I had a 2-hour daily commute.
Oh
I
my goodness.
I I didn't know that you could say no to people, things,
Yeah.
places, because I wasn't raised that way. I was raised as a woman in society where you give, 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 give until there's nothing left of you.
Yeah.
So I had to learn how to advocate for myself, set boundaries, say no.
Yeah.
I was like, "You could say no."
Like, how do I do that?
Yeah. They're like, "You just say no." And I was like, "I don't need a reason why." What?
I love that.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so I had my learning curve was steep. Um, and that's just some of it, right? Like, that doesn't count the physical recovery,
Right.
uh, that's that mountain to climb, and also the trauma and trying to learning. I figured it out when I go, "Okay, the first piece of the puzzle is I'm really afraid to go live life. So if
Mm.
I can figure out how to live without fear, that's the key. That's the secret I need to figure out." Because if I
Wow.
can live without fear, that means I can move forward. I can live life, right? I
Yeah.
can forge a new path. But I'm so terrified to even put one foot in front of the other that, like, you know, I can't even start.
Wow.
And here's the thing, like, I was going to therapy regularly. She wasn't giving me any tools how to deal with the fear. And I was like, we're just talking about feelings, which is great. Like, you need
Yeah.
somewhere to, and I'm not knocking therapy, but
Right.
I needed more than what she was offering.
Yes.
And so that's when I started researching how our brain works, how trauma works, and that's why I went down that rabbit hole, because I needed to understand where the fear comes from, why it's there, and why it's so big for us.
Right.
Right? Because I found out as I was sharing all the feelings that I was feeling, I wasn't the only one. I
Wow.
just was one of the few that had figured out a path. And people were asking me organically, like, well, what did you do?
Yeah.
And at this time, like, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a program. I didn't have a book at that time. I had nothing. I was just like, well, this is what I did, like manually telling people, which isn't a sustainable way to tell people.
Right.
That's when I was like, maybe I need an email. Maybe I need to be
Yeah.
like, I never went into this with the idea, like, of a business, or that I didn't even know others needed help. Like, I genuinely was like, something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And just sharing. And I didn't realize, like, it was a common thing, like everyone. It's a common response to an abnormal situation is what I found out
Most
in my life.
definitely. Wow, I love that you've been able to find that power through sharing your story and finding other people in the journey as well that you can help and like use your story to like really pour into them. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you have a podcast here, right? Like, you have a
Yeah.
story, and that's how you're helping people, but it's also, learning and giving others the tools that, like, we should all have, but why do we not have these,
Yes.
and why are we not taught these things? Life skills?
Yes.
No.
Yes, 1000%. I'm like, how can I just give out as many resources as I can for free that like people can just like dig through and apply to their own experience? Like, not
Mhm.
everything's going to be applicable to everyone. There's going to be bits and pieces here and there. But if we truly want to become empowered in our own wellness journeys, I feel like we do have to put on our big girl pants, like you said, and like step up for ourselves and do our own research because we know our bodies the best. We
Mhm.
can never fully explain that to someone else. And like you said, no one else is going to ever fully understand that. And so I think we need to just tune in deep to our intuition really and
Yeah.
really go for that.
Yeah, and a lot of
Yeah.
how I figured it out was guided by my intuition of, like,
Mm.
I gotta get rid of the fear. Okay, well, how do we do
Yeah.
that? I gotta do this. Okay, well, how do we do it? And then it's just like figuring out the how, which,
Yeah.
to be honest, like, getting rid of the fear was the biggest challenge, and it didn't fully dissipate for a while because I wasn't doing what I know now.
Yes.
After more training and more education, like, now I've helped my clients collapse time, and within 4 weeks, the fear is completely,
Wow.
if diminished, if not gone, like,
Right.
to a degree where they're like, I can breathe, and I'm like, yeah, because you realize when you're anxious and you're afraid, the minute that's the first thing that happens is you stop breathing, consciously or unconsciously, your breath shortens, which means your brain's not getting oxygen to function
Yes.
properly.
Yes. So
So,
true.
yeah, and even just, like, telling people that, they're like, "Really? I'm not?" I'm like, "No, you're probably not," which means, like, to a certain degree, you are making yourself sicker.
Yes, most definitely. So are you using like guided breathing practices and exercises to lead your clients through?
Some of that,
Okay.
because I don't think it's just one thing that helps. There's a multitude of things that actually, like, help collapse the time. When you do them all at once, it's really like, you're like, it's really weird. I can't even explain it because how my clients experience it is very different than how I got how I experienced it, because they're doing it in such a short amount of time, that everything they're doing at once really just somehow is like a magic portal to
Wow.
uh, to the other side, right? Like, I don't want to say, I hate the word hack, but it's a
Yeah.
way to hack our system very quickly.
Right. Right.
And it's not just breath work, like it's meditation, and it's taking back control a little bit. It's some other journaling prompts that are very specific to cancer that really help open up their eyes to see certain things in a different light, so that way they're it's because it's how our bodies react, but it's also how our brain absorbs information and processes it,
Right.
is part of the problem as well. So it's like the combination of getting the body, which is where everything comes from, the soma. That's the fear and the anxiety. It's from our body first. Our brain processes that information and goes, "Oh, I'm really scared. Oh, I'm really this. Oh, I'm really that." But our body feels everything. Body remembers everything. But when you get both in sync together, that's where the magic can happen. And that's what I
Okay.
do in that first 4 weeks. That's what we do,
And
basically.
this is like digging into somatics, correct? Like that's the process of creating more of that mind body connection.
Yeah, and we
Okay.
do it through a multitude of different ways. There's like, I'm a yoga for trauma instructor, and it the name is very misleading because it's really, I don't yoga to me is more movement,
Yeah.
a lot more movement, where this is not as much movement. There is
Okay.
movement. Um I would say it's more of like an awareness practice, but you have to like categorize it for people to get on board, I guess.
Yes.
So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of movement based practices, because what happens when you move, which is why catalyst movement is the catalyst for change, is one of my pillars, is because when you move, there's parts of your brain that shut off, so they are able to power down, for lack of a better reference,
Right.
and other things subconsciously can start working again. And when we're in our bodies, we're out of our brains. So if we're out of our body, out of our brains, we're actually tapping into like the one source that we're so very disconnected from as cancer survivors, the pokes, the prods, the trauma of
Right.
going through it for sometimes years at a time.
Yeah.
And so if we're so disconnected and the parts aren't working together, we're never going to get there. So it's connecting the pieces, having them communicate again in a way that's efficient and effective, that collapses the time. So that's why it's like, it's not just one thing at one
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
It's
makes
a
sense. It's a very holistic approach and from many different angles.
right, because we can't, like, I am I am a 3-time survivor. I have been through hell and back, for lack of
Yeah.
a better reference, and I am not on one prescription medication. So
Wow.
I try to do everything as natural as possible. I'm obviously on supplements because, our body lacks certain nutrients anyways.
Yeah.
But I try to do everything as natural as possible, because I want a cure. I don't want a temporary band-aid. I don't want something that's just going to bridge me to the other side. I don't want something, and I trust me, pharmaceuticals, I think there are certain aspects that are necessary. Obviously,
Yeah.
I went through treatment, like, I'm a fan of them,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to do it that way. And I was like, if I can rewire the system somehow,
Yeah.
I'll get rid of it and it's gone forever, right? Versus like band-aid, band-aid,
Right.
band-aid, band-aid, band-aid.
Yes. Yes. You want to get to the root of it and actually address the underlying cause. That's
Mhm.
so empowering
Yeah.
to know you're on the path to doing that. That's incredible.
hmm
Wow.
So I try and teach as much as possible, and give my clients the tools that are necessary for life. Like, a lot of women, because I give lifetime access to my program. So like, when we are done, you still have that access, is their favorite part, because I've had so many go back. I'm so glad I have this because I can reference it at any time.
Right.
Like, my memory can't memorize all of this stuff. How I don't expect you to.
You're thinking about so many other things too. Yeah. You almost just want someone to tell you what to do, probably at this point.
Mhm.
Hey, it's Lexi. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. This episode is sponsored by Heron Holistic's Functional Labs and Homeopathy. Heron Holistic's goal is to bring empowerment back to you in your wellness journey. By using functional lab tests like the hair tissue mineral analysis, Heron Holistics is able to provide you with individualized protocols that are unique to you and your life circumstances. You can learn more about working with a qualified practitioner through Heron Holistics by visiting heronholistics.com and finding the service and booking guide, also available here in the show notes. Mention the Holistic Ascent podcast to get 10% off your services. Now, let's get back to the show. So what does your program look like? Like, who's in your program and what is the duration?
It's a 13-week program. And like I referenced before, within the first 4 weeks, like, your fear and your anxiety, because that's like the first step that we need to take, is diminished, if not completely gone. Depending on the level of, I say consistency, that you do what I'm recommending you do. I work with women of all cancers, like literally brain, breast, cervical, colon, leukemias, lymphomas, like you name it. I haven't worked with one that, I don't think I've worked with a new one in a really long time. And you can be in treatment, out of treatment. I work with a lot of stage 4 women who are like, how do I live with this disease versus being completely cleared. A lot of it's very similar, but there's a little bit more strategy to the stage 4. So any point of treatment basically is where I work with women. It's really about, when do you want to start making these changes? A lot of the fear doesn't come in until you're finished, although some have it during. So usually I work with, like, the women that are like, I'm really afraid of this coming back. What are the lifestyle changes that I need to make? And I'm all about sustainable lifestyle changes, because if we cannot sustain it, it is not for us. Like, if you can't do the diet forever, that's not the diet then.
No.
And it doesn't matter what diet it is, because if you can't do it forever, it doesn't matter.
Totally true. And also, if it stresses you out more than
Right?
otherwise, then it's not worth it.
Right? And I hear about all these extremes, and I'm like, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but if we cannot do this for the entirety of your life,
yes,
it's not probably going to work, and it shouldn't be what you're doing. Let's like take it back a notch.
Yeah.
Let's find a plan that's appropriate, that you can maintain, that doesn't cause more stress, which is what we're trying to reduce in the first place.
Yes.
And still give you the core components of what that's trying to achieve. Let's do that.
Love that. You have like community space too, where your people you're working with can collaborate and like connect with each other.
Oh yeah. So I have
Okay.
a community just for the members that are inside of this program. I also have a free Facebook community, and I also have a paid community where we get to work together, because I know everyone's at a different price point. This is how you can still get the same information and access, but it doesn't cost you the same amount, because I know that cancer is expensive. I went through it.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Oh yeah. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Casey, I love that you've been filling this gap and just paving your own path in the wellness world to give these people resources and just sharing so much of your personal story. I feel like it's so empowering just to hear another person's story and your mindset behind it too, because I feel like mindset isn't something that's always talked about. And I think that's just really empowering to hear how you were able to jump through all of these hoops along the way, even if you were just sort of figuring out your way along the whole journey. But that's so empowering. I would love to know if you have like 3 practical pieces of advice for someone who is facing adversity in their wellness journey, whatever that may look like. What would your 3 pieces of advice be, or your favorite tools?
So Anybody who's facing a health crisis of any kind, like even if it's a chronic illness, like you will have breaking points, right? Like I don't know anybody that hasn't, if you're dealing with your health, been at that point where you're like, I am to the point where I'm exhausted trying to find answers and do the things that I'm doing. Is invest in the proper support. It is so vital, number one, like, and it might take a while to find it, but don't give up trying to find who it is. And it might not be in the traditional sense of a doctor, right? Like, there's so many people, so many amazing individuals who either have gone through what you've gone through or going through what you were going through, that have better, sometimes, advice, more practical advice than sometimes what a doctor has.
Yeah.
Right? Doctors are trained in specificity and not in disease prevention, right? They're in reaction mode. They're like, it already happened. How do we close the dam?
Yeah.
Which, and I, not to knock medical doctors at all. I still see a lot of them. I trust them. But we do need to take advocacy over our own health journey as well, and not sit back and be a passenger. Would be the second piece of advice, in taking back control over what we can, getting in your driver's seat. And if there's something that you can do it. Like, I couldn't do a lot during my treatment, but I got up and I walked every day. Every day.
Wow.
Every day.
You just made that conscious choice to just go and do it.
I did it. And it was sometimes extremely painful. But I sat there and I go, I'm hurting now. Even if I go walk and I'm hurting, what's the difference? I'm still hurting. It doesn't matter. It's going to be hurting, but at least maybe that'll make me feel better.
Yeah.
Right? So, and maybe I'm a glutton for punishment in that way too. I don't know.
But I feel like that's also incredible, because you told yourself, like, mentally, I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to do this. And then you went and did it. And then that reinstilled this accountability you had within yourself. And I'm sure your self-confidence and so much more that maybe really truly needed during that time.
Yeah, I think it was something that I could control. And so I did, because you have zero control over your body,
Yeah.
your bodily functions, your time, your energy, your resources. And that was one thing that I was like, I can do. I want to do it. And it every day after I did it, it made me feel better.
Wow.
And I didn't really realize at that time, because again, going by my gut, because I tried to stay off Google as much as possible, which would be the third piece of advice: stay off Google.
Yeah.
Helpful, not helpful, right?
Right.
So, which I tell my clients that all the time. Google is helpful to a certain degree. Please stop. If you don't find it in the first 2 pages, you're done. That's it. Shut it down. Shut it down. Because it at some point just becomes exacerbation of the problem, right? We're just picking at the scab, and that's not going to help it stop bleeding. And it was taking control over the little bits and pieces that it could. So, like, I made decisions very early on. If I were going to get up, I was going to get up every day. I had goals. Always setting goals for myself, because otherwise that's just, my brain doesn't operate very well. My goal was to get up every day out of bed, take a shower, walk, and eat the best that I could, because there were days that was a struggle. And if I accomplished those things, it was a good day.
Wow.
And these are days where, like, even just not throwing up on myself was a good day. And I still accomplished those things. I remember so many times walking, going, I need to pull over. I think I'm going to throw up. And just, like, not letting it stop me. Because I was like, if I throw up, I throw up. I got to get home. So I'm going to keep walking.
Yeah.
And I think that was the mindset of, was like, despite what is actually happening, you're still going to commit to these things and accomplish them. and get them done. So I took naps, but I did it on the couch. Once I got up out of bed, that was it. I wouldn't sit in bed, because if you give yourself enough time to go, you can just lay here.
Mm.
You're gonna lay there and you're not gonna get up. And
Yeah.
1 minute turns into two, into a half an hour, into 60 minutes, into 2 hours later, you're still sitting in the same spot and you're like, I haven't moved. And that doesn't make anyone feel good.
Mm.
So I was like, I'm going to get up, get out of bed, do the things. I go, then, you know what? If you go to bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so what? You did the things.
Yeah.
That was truly like
Still,
the idea of it.
that's amazing.
I was
Wow.
like, but you're not going back into that bed until you do those.
The willpower there. That's
Mhm.
incredible.
Yeah, I was like, no, you're not doing it. I don't care how sick you feel, how gross you feel, and how bad you feel. You're just, and maybe that's just like the mental fortitude that I was born with, or because of the adversity that I faced a lot of my life. I don't know where it comes from, but
Yeah.
I just knew, like, stay in your lane, horse blinders on, do the thing that your gut is telling you to do,
Yeah.
and that's all. The only moment I felt sorry for myself was the moment I was tying my shoe,
Wow.
because of such the disconnect of, like, I should be teaching a child how to do this,
Yeah.
not being taught how to do it.
Yeah.
And that was the only moment. And then I immediately was like, stop feeling sorry for yourself, because as soon as you learn how to tie your shoe, that means you got your shoe on. That means your fingers work. That means you can put on a sock. That means that you can walk on your own, that you can do all the things on your own. So then the next goal was like, tie your shoe, learn how to tie your shoe. And I sat there for hours just trying to get my little fingers to do the things. Like, and maybe that's
Wow.
just like, I was so focused on that one thing, the noise went away, everything went away until I did the thing. And then it was like,
Right.
well, what's next?
Right. That's so powerful.
That's what I tell my clients. I'm like, focus, narrow the focus,
Yeah.
because it's really not about the next day. It's about what you're doing today. If we can get you through today, you're gonna get to tomorrow. And if we get you to tomorrow and we get you through tomorrow, we're gonna get you through to the next day. And we just have to narrow the focus sometimes. Sometimes we can't worry about 5 years from now, or if it comes back when we're done. Like, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. There's tools, there's things. I go, but we got to get you through today.
I love that. I think that cuts out all the noise, and then you're able to just take one foot after the next. And I think that's so applicable in so many situations and so many areas of life too, is cutting out the overwhelm and just committing to taking that step. I think that's so powerful.
Mm-hmm. And it all
Wow.
happens by narrowing the focus, right? Like,
Mm.
people go, I want to lose 10 pounds. Well, why don't we just focus on the first 1 pound,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The first
Yeah,
one.
and so many distractions. I mean, social media, everything, like not comparing yourself to that person's profile that's like picture perfect. And like, I mean, there's so many messages thrown at us every day. How did you stay so focused like during your journey? Did you kind of omit all outside noise and you're like, I'm just committed to this and surviving?
Yeah, it really did. Again, narrow the focus of
Yeah.
what I was doing. Like I said, I tried to stay off Google as much as possible.
Yeah.
Mind you, there's a lot of information out there, and some of it's very helpful, no doubt about it. Some of it's not. And I went to a couple of groups that were of people going through cancer as well. Those I found mentally harder, because people were just complaining, and I'm like, if we're just here to complain, I don't want to be a part of that,
Mm.
because complaining about what we are currently going through does not help mentally. So I slowly, like, weeded that out. I stayed off Google. I narrowed the focus on, like, what is it that you need to get through today? You need to eat, you need to exercise, and you need to do the treatment as they're asking you to do it. And you need to stay in the mindset like you're going to get through this. And so as a result of doing that, and being so immunocompromised, a lot of the noise had to go away, right? Like, I had social media, but I didn't post about what I was going through. I had a blog, but I genuinely was like, I feel like crap today. And that was it. Because sometimes that's all I had in me to even type. And
Mhm.
I designated, sadly, my husband as the communicator to our friends and family. And I said, the noise goes through him. I
Mm.
can't, I can't answer a million texts of, are you okay today?
Yeah.
Like, it's just too much, right?
Right.
And especially when I was in the hospital, like, I didn't have my phone majority of the time anyways, because, I couldn't even be on it, right? Like, it's just like, that was mentally taxing. And so the noise went away because I made it go away. If I would have sat there on my phone answering every text, like, it would have driven me crazy,
Oh, yeah.
or answered every phone call. And so I just had to pass the buck at one point and just be like, I can't do this. And what I did learn, though, is if you don't text someone back and you're going through a chronic illness, people get very worried very quickly. So the people that I was texting back and forth, like, now I'm very, very vigilant about it, texting immediately back because I'm like, you think I'm dying. Sorry.
Right. Right.
But lesson learned. But yeah, you clear the noise. You don't
Mm.
put anything not positive inside your brain. And, it's funny. I started watching some YouTubers because it was so mindless and it was so just, I could check out, and it was never, they were always so positive about their lives, even though they're not really doing anything crazy. They're just
Yeah.
living life, that it was like, almost like, okay, I want to see someone else living because I can't. And
Mhm.
so only positive things went inside my brain and
Yeah.
my body as much as I could, and the noise went away. It had to.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing this. This has been just so powerful and so eye-opening. I just really appreciate your courage in sharing your story with so many people and for creating an incredible resource for other individuals that are going through health adversities and whatever that may be. But where can people find you if they want to get connected with you, Casey?
Yeah, even if you just want to say hi, happy to say hi to you. Would love to. Like, it'd be great. On social media, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Happier Hustle. I'm also on LinkedIn and all those things. It's just Case Kang. That's it.
Yay! Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Lexi, for having me. I appreciate it as well.
Well, I don't know about you all, but I found it really encouraging to hear Casey's story and her testimony. I could really relate to her when she was talking about hitting a breaking point in your health and wellness journey. And for me, I've definitely hit that this year with our mold illness and everything that we've been experiencing with our home. And it's so true that there comes a day where you literally have the option to lay in bed all day and do nothing and sit in that nervous breakdown, which don't get me wrong, I think that's okay for a little bit of time. But there comes a point where you just have to make that decision to get up no matter how you're feeling and to keep moving forward and to go for those things that you can control in your life. I thought it was so incredibly potent to hear about Casey's fortitude in deciding to walk every day in the hospital, no matter how she felt. And I just thought that was so powerful to hear that as an example. And I think that's something that can be applied to all of our lives. We have those days where we feel like we don't want to do anything and it would be easier just to lay in bed. But the truth is that we aren't going to get any closer to our goals or to the life that we probably have envisioned for ourselves unless we take action. And that's moving forward. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I really felt encouraged hearing Casey's story and what she's decided to do with her life because of that, and to help so many other individuals who are experiencing cancer or chronic disease and who just need a little bit of guidance along the way. I also couldn't agree with her more in the sentiment that you need to find a support system no matter where you're at. And sometimes you just have to cut out all of the noise. You have to cut out relationships. You have to cut out things that are no longer serving you when you hit a certain point in your life, because your health becomes the most important thing at that moment. And you need to find that support system to move forward. So I hope you all can follow along with Casey's journey and her community on Instagram and Facebook and find value in that. Anyways, I'll catch you on the next episode of the Holistic Ascent podcast. Have a great day, y'all.